Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. Joining me this evening via Skype, Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Good evening, Gordon.
And sitting on my, or your right-hand side, I suppose, is Dave Tucker, our Rural Affairs correspondent. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go straight for the coronavirus update. And as of 2 o'clock this afternoon in Scotland, there's now been a total of 132,001 coronavirus tests concluded. And of these, 116,319 tests were confirmed negative. 15,682 tests were positive. There were 613 people in hospital last night, 15 of whom were in intensive care, with another 6 suspected COVID-19 in intensive care. This marks an increase of 17 confirmed new cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection has sadly risen to 2,439. This number only includes those who have died in hospital after receiving a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 41,279 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 151. This number refers to the deaths in all settings and not just in hospitals. Now to our first story of the evening, the Treasury treatment of the Scottish Parliament. The SNP's MSPs on Holyrood's Economy Committee have today branded the UK government's treatment of the committee disgraceful, after it refused to provide information to the committee that was later released to the media. In a letter on the 26th of May 2020, the Scottish Parliament's Economy Committee asked the Chief Secretary to the Treasury to provide regular written updates with Scotland-specific data on the UK government economic response to COVID-19, including the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, the Job Retention Scheme, the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme and the Bounce Back Loan Scheme. The Treasury responded claiming that the UK government is accountable to the UK Parliament and so need to proceed with this in mind. And as such, I do not intend to provide evidence to each of the devolved legislators. Less than a week later, the UK government released the information to the media. The SNP said this shows a complete lack of respect for devolution. In commenting, Gordon MacDonald, MSP, said the UK government's point-blank refusal to cooperate with the Scottish Parliament to release vital economic data on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic is disgraceful. The committee has not asked for anything unreasonable, and the UK government clearly have the information we requested, as they are more than happy to provide it to the press. Now, at a time when the Scottish Parliament's committees are undertaking vital work to assess, scrutinise and respond to the global pandemic, this shows a complete lack of respect for vital work of the devolved parliaments. Chris, I think I will kick this one off with your response, and I think I can probably anticipate what that response might be.
Well, I mean, you know, first, do we expect anything else from the Tories? Second, it shows, you know, as Mr. MacDonald said, a severe lack of respect. But, you know, we should be used to this by now, because it's not a union of equals. You know, and to find it out through the media, it just highlights the fact that we are regarded as second-class citizens. Yep. You know, I can't reaffirm enough the fact that we need to get out of this despotic union once and for all.
Okay, Dave, what's your reaction to this? I detect a little tinge, perhaps, maybe, of political, not point scoring, but posturing here. What do you think?
Yes, I detect complete ignorance in that they don't seem to realise that all these things that they do, these actions, they might think they're point scoring, but actually it's going to backfire on them, because it's not just Scotland they're doing it to, it's Indeed. All the devolved nations. And it will backfire on them. It looks so bad.
Well, it seems to me, I mean, the information, as has been said by the MSP who's complaining about this, they actually had the information to hand, and they were quite willing to give it to the British press, but not willing to give it to a government department which needs it to plan for the safety and the health of the people of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. It seems a deliberate provocation almost.
Yes. Well, it's feeding into the desire of those of us who want independence. It gives us a weapon to use against them. And I just can't understand what kind of thought process is going on in their minds. Maybe they do want us to get independence.
You actually think that they might be trying to push us away, Dave?
Well, I would love to think that, but who knows? The whole thing is all about disruption and confusion. And even I'm confused. Why would they do a thing like that makes them look really, really bad and inefficient, let's face it? If they're not going to supply the devolved governments with that sort of information that will help them, as Chris says, to plan ahead, then how is that going to help their whole UK economy? It's not. It's going to backfire.
You would think so. Chris, have you anything more on this? Any other further thoughts?
The only other thing that I'm going to add, which pretty much augments what Dave was saying, is that, yes, we can use it as ammunition against them, but, there's a litany of faux pas by the Westminster Tories, against the devolved nations, which shows clear contempt for the devolved settlement. They were totally against it in the first place, and that is the same for Scotland, the same for Wales, the same for Northern Ireland. I was actually surprised when Stormont got up and running again, because I actually thought that the Tories would want to enjoy having their direct rule, and possibly, if the next set of elections turned out that Labour weren't in charge in Wales, they would just take over Labour as well. What we are seeing here is a complete disregard, a complete disrespect for every devolved nation. Yeah. And just as Dave said, it's like they don't actually know what they're doing, and we can see that day to day in the COVID updates, that they just haven't got a clue. They are not a responsible government.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going to move to our next story now. That is that at Westminster Scottish Affairs Committee today, Mhairi Black has said that the Tory government has shown zero respect for devolution after it was revealed that there hasn't been a COBRA meeting for over a month, despite the number of decisions having to be made across the UK during that period. In today's Scottish Affairs Committee session, Jean Freeman, Scotland's Health Secretary, said that she can't understand why there hasn't been a COBRA meeting on the coronavirus crisis since the 10th of May, and revealed that the Scottish office has failed to reach out to her at any point throughout the pandemic. In commenting, the SNP Shadow Scottish Secretary and Scottish Affairs Committee member Mhairi Black MP said the Tories have shown that they have zero respect for devolution by failing to hold a COBRA meeting on the coronavirus, a meeting to facilitate a four-nation approach to responding to the crisis for over a month. And it also speaks volumes that Alistair Jack has been the invisible man during this crisis. A fact that the Secretary of State for Scotland has failed to reach out to the Scottish Health Secretary raises serious questions as to what exactly his department does to justify its expensive price tag to taxpayers. The UK government's complacency and negligence is jaw-dropping. A number of important announcements have been made across the UK since the 10th of May, yet Boris Johnson hasn't felt the need to hold a meeting that would allow the four nations to engage on how best to respond to the crisis. Now again, if I come to you first on this one, Dave, This is Mary Black, who's obviously complaining here that Scotland is being shut out of the decision-making process, but that Boris Johnson and his cabinet seem to be, they can't be bothered having a Cobra meeting to discuss anything. It seems remarkable.
Well, not really, because it's all part of Dominic Cummings' strategy. But if you cast your mind back to 2016, when the vote was cast and the devolved nations they were promised that they would be involved in the Brexit negotiations, and Mike Russell had an enormously difficult task to even get in touch with them. So it's been ongoing since then, and it's got worse. And it's got worse since Dominic Cummings stepped into number 10 after that 80-seat landslide that Boris Johnson got.
Yep.
So it will only get worse. It will only look worse in the eyes not just of the devolved nations, but of Europe and the rest of the world. It just looks appalling.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Chris, your reaction, this is another, it seems another slap in the face to the devolved nations, not just to Scotland, as Dave was saying. This seems to be a UK-wide attitude. In other words, the United Kingdom government's attitude to the devolved nations is they can't be bothered.
Well, it basically backs up what I said earlier on the first piece. You know, we're talking about a Prime Minister who, in the most crucial fortnight of the country's history since the Second World War, decided to bugger off on holiday for a fortnight. And that crucial fortnight is going to be the defining moment of his premiership. You know, this is just a continuation of their lackadaisical approach towards serious engagement with not only the devolved nations, but also you know the way that Jacob Rees-Mogg you know wants to introduce his bizarre conga line in the House of Commons. It's all down to it's all to do with bluff and bluster. This is very difficult for me to say. Obfuscation.
Obfuscation.
Yeah. Try to say that with the dog's teeth in.
That's all right.
But they will try anything to avoid doing things the way that they should be done properly. And, you know, I made an interesting observation the other day there about, I can't remember his first name, but it's Hoyle, the Speaker of the House.
Lindsay Hoyle.
Well, yeah. Oh, my God. I don't think that the Tory government would be getting away with as much as what they're getting away with under Lindsay Hoyle had John Bercow still been in charge, because honestly, he looks like a lackey for the Tory party, you know, when it comes down to, you know,
keeping order,
protocol and, you know, the way that things are done. And he's ably backed up by that. Again, I can't remember her name, but she comes from Paisley, the deputy.
Elizabeth Lang, I think.
Yeah. She, you know, I mean, it's hard to imagine that she comes from Paisley.
Yeah.
And you know, the lack of disregard that you know is shown to the SNP MPs, whereas at least Bercow actually had, you know, a bit of respect.
He was much more neutral, I think, Chris, you could probably say. And he also, you could hear him bellowing order at the Tory MPs when they were being loud and objectionable. Chris, I was...
He was also very... he was very sort of like matter of fact with procedure and due diligence.
He kept order, Chris. I think that's the bottom line, isn't it?
And you know, I think that the Tories are taking advantage of the fact that they've got a very, very weak speaker.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to move to our next story, which is a little bit different this time. Now, the UK government has now published new guidelines for airlines and airports on how to operate safely to minimise the risks from coronavirus, adding to the hopes that the country will soon agree deals to allow quarantine-free travel. Passengers and staff should wear face coverings in airports and on aircraft, while passengers should check in all luggage, including handbags, and remain seated for as much of the flight as possible, said the Department of Transport. Since the outbreak of coronavirus, there has been minimal flying into and out of Britain. Airlines had been hoping for a recovery in July, but they say that new UK rules requiring international arrivals to quarantine for 14 days have pushed this back. The Westminster government has said that work is continuing on air bridges between countries with low infection rates, something which the industry says is vital to kickstart travel demand and to avoid further job losses on top of the tens of thousands already announced. We're taking the necessary steps to ensure a framework is in place for the aviation industry to bounce back when it is safe for restrictions on travel to be lifted, said the Transport Minister Grant Shapps in a statement. The airlines included EasyJet, Ryanair and British Airways have already said that customers must wear face coverings on board. The guidance to put most baggage in the hold could be problematic for some low-cost airlines such as Ryanair, which formerly charged a premium for customers to keep larger bags with them in the cabin. The government also said that in its guidance that there should be extensive cleaning of aircraft and more availability of hand washing and hand sanitizer facilities. Dave, if I could speak to you first on this particular subject. Now, it's been a long time coming. The aviation industry has, I think it's fair to say, suffered disproportionately more than almost any other industry in the UK from huge job losses. And there has to, I suppose, got to be a turnaround at some point for them. Do you think this is the beginning of it?
Oh, I think it probably is. But I mean, as you said right at the start there, it's almost gobsmacking that it's taken this long to come up with those actions. Really, the industry itself could have come up with these things as a proposal to the government.
Many people, I think, they expected the quarantine to have come first and not so late, and then be gradually scaled back as things got better. You know, it seems like the UK has decided to go into quarantine as all the other countries of Europe are coming out of it.
Yes, and that's what you get with a government of incompetence.
So basically, that's it. Incompetent government has left us with this huge, these huge losses. Chris, I know you have a vested interest being a person who works in the aviation industry. What's your view of these new measures announced today?
They're absolutely deplorable. They really are. If anybody is watching from the UK government, they need to need to look at the ACI reports and reviews, which is the Airport Council, the Airport Council's International, and they need to start listening to the Airport Council because they actually adopt the European model. They follow the European guidelines. And if I can just give you one wee snippet, just for argument's sake.
Okay.
Just as an introduction, in this COVID-19 crisis, it is essential for airports and aviation in general to be supported by the European institutions and national governments. Aviation was hit by COVID-19 in an unprecedented way with far-reaching and long-lasting economic consequences. In order to sustain the industry and help alleviate the financial burden, the set of supported measures below is recommended. And it goes on to say, most European airlines grounded their operations with little or no air traffic. Right, so all throughout this, I would love to send it to you so that you can read it. Because
Chris, who was it who sent this information, Chris?
It is the ACI, right, which is the Airports Council International.
Okay, so this is an international body.
This is an international body that looks after aircraft, interests around the world, right? It takes an overarching view. It doesn't do it, by country or, by, in out EU, America, they look after everything.
So what you're saying is, Chris, that the British government will have seen this advice, this information as well, surely?
If they were a competent government, they would be reading these papers. And, one simple Google search will bring these papers up. The one that I've brought up is titled ACI Europe Working Paper, Off the Ground.
So in other words, they're already kind of ahead of the game in international terms.
Miles ahead of the game.
And we are just getting off the starting blocks here.
Yeah, I've been talking to my colleagues at Glasgow Airport, and they are more than willing to wear face masks, gloves, all the rest. But I actually, before COVID, I was actually arguing the fact that hand sanitizers should be on every checkout desk.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact. And the fact that, disposable gloves should be worn as well. Because people turn up at the airport, they've got their bags at their feet, they're panicking. Have I got my money? Have I got my passport? The passport's stuck in their mouth.
Yeah, okay. I think we're getting a picture here, Chris.
And they take it out and they hand it to you, and then they look at you and wonder why you're pulling a face.
I see.
Feckin' slabbers all over it.
Okay, well, I think that gives our viewers a very clear view, Chris, I think, of the problems facing the ground staff at airports, particularly. I wondered actually whether the introduction of these, Chris, I wondered if the introduction of these new measures would actually keep your staff safer.
Well, the other thing as well is the fact that this body looks after every airport worker, right? Now that's from checkout to ground staff, to shop staff, to border force, to ICTS who run the security.
Yeah.
And it also covers the staff who are working in the tower.
Okay.
Also, the ground staff, you would be amazed at the amount of people who actually work on the ground that you don't see.
Yeah.
You just don't think about. We're talking mechanics, we're talking about fuelers, we're talking about baggage handlers, obviously. There's even a guy whose sole job description is to keep the runway clear of birds.
Fair enough. Chris, can I ask you a question? Beg your pardon, Dave. What were you saying?
I was just thinking that. The guys that have the hawks and clear the runway of birds. How bizarre that you and I were thinking that at exactly the same moment.
Okay. Well, listen, I'd like to move on now. And the next industry, actually, which is going to be moving out, as it were, from lockdown, appears to be the construction industry. And the construction sector is commencing the next phase of its restart plan in response to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. It's the third of a 6-phase approach devised by the industry in line with Scottish Government guidelines and will allow a slow build-up of workforces to optimum capacity, whilst physical distancing remains in force. Work in this phase of non-essential sites can only be carried out within physical distancing parameters. Early stages of the plan included health and safety planning and risk assessments, followed by preparatory work to implement the new cleaning measures, install signage, and to arrange appropriate security at construction sites. Now, Dale, let me take you first on this. I actually had noticed in my own neighbourhood that work had restarted on a new public nursery just 2 days ago, so I imagine that this is part of this restart. Have you seen anything in your own neighbourhood which has seen the construction workers returning?
No, to be honest, I haven't, but that's because I rarely leave the farm.
Yeah.
I do know, for instance, that there are joiners who normally work inside big building projects who are out of work, but they're able to do, for instance, help out a neighbour if they want a garden shed.
Right.
Keep complete physical distancing, and they can put up this garden shed because they're not actually touching or going near neighbour, and they're getting a wee bit of money that way.
Of course, part of the first phase was actually, bringing people gradually back into the workplace in small numbers, and I'm guessing, Chris, that this latest relaxation is going to see a gradual increase in the workforce on building sites as these new health and safety measures have now been put into place for them to follow.
Yeah, and what is in line with the 5 points that were pointed out by the STUC, which it was basically all about the actual health and safety, not just of the site, but also of the workforce as well.
Yeah,
and the gradual introduction of workers onto a site, whether it be 5 one day, 8 the next day, 12 the following day, and stuff like that, and all the rest of it. That as long as a company can show that it is respecting the social distancing,
yes,
and it is also adhering to the health and safety guidelines laid down and agreed between unions and employers.
Indeed.
With regards to hand washing facilities, again with the social distancing and stuff like that, then yes, we should be welcoming the fact that although it's slow, it is still a reintroduction, and it allows various parts of a building site to get ready in order for the next phase, which is next Thursday, where hopefully we'll see a further relaxation of the rules.
Chris, I was going to say that the way that this process has been constructed by the Scottish Government is in 6 phases. And for the construction industry, it has now got some certainty that working together with the government, with the trades unions, that there is now a light at the end of the tunnel. And so the contracts that they're working on and the people who are paying them to do that are now going to feel a lot more relaxed about it. There's not going to be penalties, I would hope, paid by contractors who finish a job late because of coronavirus.
Yeah, but and honestly, I don't want to labour on a political point, but without the Scottish Government listening to the STUC in the first place, because the STUC done this work about 4 weeks ago and actually advised the government the best practice to go forward in, and the government have taken that on board.
This is good.
Then it shows that the Scottish Government are engaging with the trade unions.
Which is, and also engaging, Chris, Chris, surely they're also engaging with the industry and the business managers themselves, because they are at the top of the tree of health and safety.
Yes, but what I am saying is the fact that it shoots down Richard Leonard in flames when it says that the Scottish Government do not engage with the unions. That is absolute tosh. Okay,
Chris, you've made your point extremely well. Thank you very much for that. Okay, to our next story now. And Centrica, the owner of British Gas, is to slash 5,000 jobs as it looks to cut costs by simplifying its business structure. The company is removing 3 layers of management, with more than half the job losses falling on leadership roles, including half of its 40-strong senior team. The restructuring is expected to take place in the second half of 2020 following staff consultations. The group said that it also intends to simplify its employee terms and conditions, as it has up to 80 different employee contracts, with some agreements in place for more than 35 years. Centrica's chief executive, Chris O'Shea, said the company's complex business model hinders the delivery of our strategy, adding that the group had lost half of its earnings in recent years. I truly regret that these difficult decisions will have to be made, and I understand the impact on the colleagues who will have to leave us. However, the changes we are proposing to make are designed to arrest our decline, allow us to focus on our customers and create a sustainable company, O'Shea said. British Gas has faced growing competition from challenger energy suppliers and has been hemorrhaging customers for several years. It has lost 286,000 customers from its energy supply business in 2019, although that was a slower rate of decline than the previous 2 years. Centrica employs a total of 27,000 people, of which 20,000 are in the UK. During the lockdown, the group furloughed 3,800 workers, the majority of whom are engineers, when they were unable to enter customers' homes except to carry out emergency work. It's understood that there will be little overlap between the furloughed staff and those in more senior roles who will be made redundant. Now, Day, I think I'll let you have a shot at this one. This obviously is bad news, but it's bad news for managers for a change. Normally, when you hear these sorts of announcements, it's the workers at the bottom of the food chain who are being made redundant. This time, they seem to be taking the axe to the top level of management.
Yes, and not before time.
Well, it's also mid-level, I suppose, as well. But they did say they were concentrating on some of their top team as well.
Yes, yes. Well, yes, as you say, it is a different way of doing things. But if it's been the same for 30 years, that kind of explains why they're doing it, because it's clearly wrong to be going along the same model for 30 years.
It sounds like they've been carrying a lot of surplus weight. There are a lot of middle managers who really they can live without. And now they've decided that that's what they're going to do. They're going to cut the highest paying jobs and have a look at all the other contracts and try to simplify them.
Yeah.
Did you hear me that last statement there?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dale, listen, don't worry, we'll get you back connected. Chris, as a union man, this must, at the same time as being a series of job cuts, it also is hitting management. Now, management are not traditionally targets of these cuts, are they?
Well, no, they're not. And what we have to point out on this story is the fact that the restructuring, if I could use that in inverted commas, not down to COVID-19.
No, I think they would admit that themselves.
Yeah. They actually have admitted that, and it's down to the fact that you know it's been a badly structured company for the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, but what we have to be, well, not us ourselves, but what we have to be mindful of is that they do not follow the same line that Mr. Walsh at BA is looking to go down. Which
Okay, how does it compare? How does it compare?
Insofar as they pay middle management off, and then they basically put those roles and responsibilities onto other people without paying them the exact same wage.
Yeah, that's an old technique of management. That
I said as much to Kenny on Tuesday night's show. I remember when I was in Safeway, and basically I had to reapply for my job, where they paid off all the department managers and called us controllers. But yet we were still doing the same work as managers. You know, just the fact that we had lost 10 grand out of our wages you know, in order to keep their jobs. And that's exactly what Mr. Walsh wants to do. So I'm hoping that this isn't going to be the case with British Gas. But again, this is a wonderful possibility here where we can actually cut ties with Centrica and actually have our own Scottish gas back.
Well, I think you're talking about, Chris, if Scotland were independent right now, it could have its own gas agency or its own gas board back again.
But we could be doing the groundwork just now, Gordon.
Yeah. It's all, of course, was sold off during Mrs. Thatcher's reign, was it not?
It's all been sold off, but you know, there have been wider calls that the government, where companies are in danger, just say for argument's sake, Rolls-Royce.
Yeah.
Basically, there are wider calls now for the Scottish government to actually buy the actual shares in these companies in order to shore them up, so that when we come out of COVID, that we could actually buy the shares back. So basically, the Scottish government keeps these companies afloat.
And of course, the Scottish government has done this before, Chris, notably with Prestwick Airport and with the ferry contract recently as well. Anyway, Chris, I'm going to have to leave this subject now, moving along to your next story. And high-level talks between Britain and the European Union involving Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will take place on June the 15th. Financial Times reporter Jim Brunsden has tweeted. Meanwhile, France wants a hard line on fishing in Brexit negotiations, according to a report by the National Assembly European Affairs Committee today. The French parliamentarians urged President Emmanuel Macron's government to keep the French fishermen's right to fish in British waters. The union must continue to guarantee that fishing won't be sacrificed to save other sectors, the report seen by Reuters says. The report was co-written by Jean-Pierre Pont, a member of parliament for Macron's party who represents the town of Boulogne on the English Channel, France's busiest fishing port. The UK government has said it wants to have full control over its waters and fish in its future outside of the European Union. However, Brexit supporting Peterhead fisherman Jimmy Buchan has warned of disaster for the Scottish fishing industry if there's a no-deal Brexit. European diplomats have said last month that the EU was willing to shift its stance on fisheries and move from the maximalist position of maintaining the situation as it is in order to help forge a trade deal. French politicians have also urged Paris to do more to prepare for a no-deal, which they said was the most likely scenario. Scottish fishing grounds are among the richest in the North East Atlantic zone, where most of the EU catch is hauled in. Day, I think I know that your main area of expertise is in farming, but I also know that you have an interest in fishing as well. How do you think the Scottish fishermen are going to take to this kind of language coming from the European Union, that they're prepared to trade away a little bit of their fishing rights if it means getting a trade deal over the line?
The Scottish fishermen are prepared
Scottish.
to trade it away.
This is the European Union has said that it might be willing to relax their hard line on maintaining fishing. They are wanting to get a deal over the line and are willing to make a compromise on the common fishing policy.
Right.
So the question now is how do this...
Writing. I can't see how they can do that because they'll have France and the other countries that fish there jumping up and down. Fish is a great big...
Yeah, of course, France is doing exactly that. The French fishermen are lobbying their own parliamentarians to say they mustn't give away the fishing rights.
Yes, I mean, if you're ever in France and you're in a supermarket, you'll see how important fish is in the menu of the French people.
Yeah.
And their fish counters are absolutely amazing.
Well, Chris, I mean, how do you feel about this? The Scottish fishermen would be affected by this in some way. At the moment, we're part of the Common Fisheries Policy, which restricts, as I understand it, the quotas, the amount of fish that Scottish boats can land, but not access. Do you think Scottish fishermen, that they seem to be saying, or British fishermen generally seem to be worried about a no-deal Brexit? But what would their response to this be if the EU is genuine and is prepared to give back a little bit of the fishing rights?
Yeah, but well, you know, I hate to point out to the British fishermen, but you've got to reap what you sow. They were the ones that voted for Brexit. They were the ones that wanted to take back quotas, and it's not possible because the EU were always going to play hardball with the fishing quotas, as Day rightly points out. You go into any European supermarket, be it France, Spain, whatever, their fish counters are about the size of our Tesco clothing departments.
Okay.
They are huge. Honestly, they are huge. And I mean, this is just a side issue. Because I mean, you have to remember the fact that the Tories sold the bloody fishermen out back in the 70s anyway. So anybody that thinks that the Tories won't sell the fishermen out again, are pretty much too.
Of course, so this Chris, this is exactly what Jimmy Buchan is moaning about, and he was one of the men who was shouting loudest for Brexit.
Aye, and to be honest with you, and I'll say it, Jimmy Buchan's an arse. Really,
allegedly,
because the fishermen themselves so many of them sold their own quota to Spain and to France and to other countries. So, and now they're yelling. Are they going to pay the money to French fishermen and other fishermen to get their quota back?
Exactly. Of course, they're not going to do that, Day. And you've hit that nail right on the head there. And what again? I go back to the fact that although this is a big issue, it is a sideshow, and it's a sideshow for the mainstream media. The main issues here are being totally obfuscated.
Yeah,
they're not being discussed.
Okay. Well, listen, Chris. It's obviously you feel this is a distraction from the main business of what might be coming down the line with Brexit. However, we have to move on. I'm afraid time is against us tonight. And moving across the Atlantic now, and George Floyd's younger brother took his grief to the US Congress yesterday with an impassioned plea that lawmakers not let his brother's death be in vain, lamenting that he didn't deserve to die over $20 in what was called a lynching. The House of Representatives Judiciary Committee held the first congressional hearing to examine racial injustice and police brutality following George Floyd's May the 25th death after a Minneapolis policeman knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. His death prompted a wave of protests in US cities and abroad. They lynched my brother. That was a modern-day lynching in broad daylight. Philonise Floyd, at 42 of Missouri City, Texas, near Houston, told the committee, his voice breaking with emotion. His life mattered. All our lives matter. Black lives matter, he added, wiping away tears. The Democratic-led House is moving forward with sweeping reform legislation that could come to a vote by July the 4th, while Senate Republicans are crafting a rival plan. George wasn't hurting anyone that day. He didn't deserve to die over $20. So I'm asking you, is that what a black man's life is worth? $20. This is 2020. Enough is enough, his brother said. It's on you to make sure his death is not in vain. I'm here to ask you to make it stop. Stop the pain. Philonise Floyd testified. George called for help and he was ignored. Please listen to the call I'm making to you now, to the calls of our family and the calls ringing on the streets of all the world. It's unclear whether Democrats and Republicans will be able to overcome partisan differences to pass legislation that President Donald Trump might be willing to sign. Several Republicans pledged cooperation and voiced support for a pivotal provision that would scale back so-called qualified immunity protections that shield police from lawsuits by people suing for damages. Now, Day, this is a very emotive subject at the moment. I think we could all agree. Mr. Floyd has gone to make a plea directly to lawmakers. He's taken it, I think, to the highest, well, the highest authority that he can. Do you think he has a chance of success with this, Dame, or is this again going to be something Donald Trump might not want to enact?
I think yes. I think the latter.
We're losing the sound a little bit on Day's microphone.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we seem to have lost sound on Day. I'll come back to Day. Day, we can't hear you at the moment. Do you have a problem with your mic?
No, that's it. Switched on.
Oh.
I'm speaking.
Okay, we're a little bit quiet, but we can still hear you, Day. Do you think that Mr. Floyd has much hope of getting new laws passed that Mr. Trump might sign off on?
I don't, but then I'm awfully pessimistic about America, full stop. So I'm perhaps not the best person to ask. And even if they do get it passed, it's so endemic in American society. You know, how on earth are they going to get it changed?
Well,
how can you change that kind of society?
Well, what they're looking at, Day, is at least changing one pivotal provision, and that would be to try to remove the so-called qualified immunity protections that actually protect police from lawsuits by people suing for damages. And if that were the case, that would open the door to people who've been assaulted or possibly who have died whilst in custody to bring lawsuits against other American policemen.
Mm-hmm. Or literally lynched, because wasn't there somebody lynched just prior to what happened to George Floyd? There was a person, we saw videos of it.
Yeah. So it's still going on, and the racism will not be stamped out by this, obviously. But what Mr. Floyd is trying to do, and what the politicians are trying to do, is worthy. Chris, your take on this, very, very quickly, please.
Well, I mean, it's not just racism. You know, I mean, day after day, we see videos from the US. I actually seen one today. I could not believe it, where a guy was walking his dog, and he got called back by the police.
Yeah.
He took the dog into the car. The windows were down on the car. The police turned him round, cuffed him, started questioning him and stuff like that. The dog started to get agitated. The dog jumped out of the car and went to go for the police because they were obviously manhandling his master, and they shot the feckin' dog.
They shot the dog.
They shot the dog.
Yeah, Chris, just moderate your language a little bit for our viewers. This is a tea time show, after all. But I get you. I understand why you're angry. So they shot the dog. Yeah, this, as I say, I don't think we're going to heal this racial rift in America and the rest of the world instantly. But certainly, if Mr. Floyd, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah. What happened with George Floyd was the fact that it was a $20 counterfeit note.
Yeah.
Being a white person that had a $20 counterfeit note, they would have checked the counterfeit. They would have said, "Oh, excuse me, sir, you realise this is counterfeit," yada yada yada, and all the rest of it. It wouldn't have been an issue. But you know, we're hearing reports of the fact that the supermarket agent, the shop agent, immediately phoned the police.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he also said that Mr. Floyd was one of his regulars and a very pleasant, nice man he had a lot of time for.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, have you never had a counterfeit note in your life?
I have to say, Chris, I've seen them occasionally when I was doing bar work many years ago. They've turned up quite regularly.
It's entirely possible, but the actual action out by the police is disproportionate to the crime.
Okay.
And that is a point in question when I highlight the incident with the dog.
All right, Chris.
It's just wrong. It's heavy-handed contact from the police. You know, the police have you know, they've trained and they've bred these operatives to
Chris,
be 100% gung-ho at all times. And the very minute that you give somebody a gun, it gives them a license to do what they want.
Chris, thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's a very important subject. Now we're moving on, and students facing hardship this summer due to COVID-19 can now receive financial support within a package of new measures. The Scottish Government has brought forward early access to £11.4 million of discretionary funds, support for higher education students in financial difficulty, to be administered by colleges and universities. Unlike higher education students, most former further education students can receive benefits if they're unemployed. Colleges will now have flexibility to offer discretionary funds to bridge the timing gap between bursary payments ending in June and universal credit payments starting. Scottish students studying in Europe as part of EU portability or historically arranged schemes will be able to access a £100,000 emergency fund administered by the Student Awards Agency in Scotland. The SAAS has also suspended all new debt recovery actions in respect to grants and bursaries until September for students whose circumstances have changed and who may have to return overpayments. Students are encouraged to contact the SAAS to discuss what help is available. So, Dave, this is a good news story. More students getting more help from the Scottish Government, it seems.
Yes, yes. Oh, it's just what the Scottish Government does. It realises how important education is, and particularly for our own people. Because if you've got an educated people and a healthy, well-fed people, they will be productive and it will help the economy. That's something, it's very basic, but it's something that the government down in Westminster doesn't seem to be able to understand.
But here they do understand it. Chris, if I could bring you into this discussion. The Scottish Government seems to have been, I think, very forthright and also very public in its support for all kinds of different groups of people in Scotland. And students are often forgotten about in these calculations, aren't they?
Well, I've got nothing but respect and glowing reports for SAS. My youngest son, Scott, has been receiving SAS for the last 4 years whilst up in Aberdeen. It is one department that seems to operate with very little hitch, on it at all. It just seems to be a very, very well-oiled machine. And even when the whole COVID thing started and whatnot, SAS were right away. They had sent him a letter within a week saying, "Don't worry, your SAS is all sorted." And along with the SAS goes with the housing benefit and all the rest of it. I have got nothing but glowing reports for SAS. They really are a fantastic body. They really are.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you'll be glad I've got another story for you of more good news from the Scottish Government. More than 2,000 households will be able to buy a new build home as the Help to Buy Scotland scheme is extended by a year until March 2022. Supported by £55 million of funding for 2021-22, the extension will also help house builders to ensure their economic recovery over the years ahead. The Housing Minister, Kevin Stewart, said, "A strong and growing house building industry is vital to Scotland's future economic prosperity, and particularly as we plan our strategic economic recovery from COVID-19. This extension will provide us with the opportunity to reassess future priorities for the market, taking account of economic conditions following the pandemic, as well as providing a helping hand for those seeking to buy their own home." Dave, here's another piece of excellent news for those who are trying to buy their own home. And obviously this is a really bad time, I would guess, for people buying and selling homes. In fact, I think there was an actual ban at one point on buying and selling property. I'm not sure if it's been lifted yet.
I think it has been lifted, yes. Yes, I'm sure it's just been lifted within the...
Okay, Dave, we're losing your sound a little bit. I think you must be brushing against the microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry, we missed the last sentence that you said there, Dave. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I I don't know where this microphone is. It's possibly on the side of my laptop, and I have.
Yeah, you might have your hand over it, maybe.
I'm so non-techie.
Well, that's all right.
But yeah, again, I think housing is so important. And I think what we're lucky to have a government that looks on these things as investments. Instead of spending money, they look on it as an investment because they do get returns. If you look after people, you will get a return on it. I'm thinking about even myself and both my girls. We went through colleges and universities, which was paid for by the Scottish Government. And I've spent a lifetime in teaching. My daughter is working hard in the NHS, helping to fight COVID. And the other daughter, she's contributing to the tax thing, although she's living in France just now, but she's still contributing tax back this way. So, no, I think Scottish Government, the difference between the way they look at how they spend their money and the way that Westminster is looking with the Tory government, they won't ever get a return on their money. It'll all go into the big hedge fund managers and the people who've got enough money anyway.
Perhaps into the debt black hole that the UK seems to have. Chris, what's your reaction to this news? Obviously, it is good news. The house building industry needs this, as well as people needing homes.
Yeah, quite clearly the house building industry will do well out of this, but you know, I think you'll probably be surprised at the fact that I'm not too happy about this, Gordon. Because, you know, I'm not trying to be obtuse, but I think Kevin Stewart's actually got this a bit, you know, wrong. You know, because this is at a time when we need to actually have social housing for rent, and that rent needs to be proportionate for the people to actually afford to live in it. I think that needs to get sorted first before we think about actually building houses for you know, sale and all the rest of it. In Scotland, there is a deficit of 35% of affordable homes.
Okay.
You know, and this has to be addressed.
Okay,
long before
Chris,
we think about you know, building homes.
Chris, thank you.
A profit.
Chris, thank you for that. Day, you had something you wanted to contribute.
Yeah, I may have misunderstood, but these houses are to be affordable homes.
Yeah, but they are still private homes. They're not what we would call the old parlance of council houses. These are private homes owned by individuals, I think. Anyway, I'd like to move to our final story this evening, since we're almost there, and that is, if we find it, Veterans Minister is commenting on the 80th anniversary of events at San Valery-en-Caux. Commenting on the commemorations to mark the 80th anniversary of events at San Valery-en-Caux, Veterans Minister Graham Day said, "There's barely a town or village in the Highlands that was unaffected by events at San Valery in June, 1940. And yet many people today don't know the incredible bravery shown by the soldiers of the 51st Highland Division. 80 years on from such a significant date in Scotland's history, it's vitally important that the heroic stance of the 51st Division took that day is remembered, not only today, but in the years to come." Day, if I can briefly bring you in on this, we did a programme on Broadcasting Scotland about this and all about VE Day. Of course, this relates to Dunkirk, doesn't it? This is the 51st Division were tasked with holding back the Germans while the troops got off the beaches at Dunkirk.
Yes. And do we learn anything about that in history? No. It's. I mean, I've only just discovered that happened, and you won't be hearing Boris Johnson standing up saying something nice about it in Parliament. They were all talking about VE Day and all that sort of stuff, but they wouldn't say anything about the 51st Highland Brigade and what happened to them.
No, of course. Chris, if I could bring you in very quickly on this, of course, it was Winston Churchill who took the momentous decision to leave the 51st Division in fighting this fallback position, doesn't it? He actually made that choice.
Yeah, and when you put it out on your social media, as I did, be prepared for an awful lot of yuns who spit the dummy out when you actually point it out to them, and they also point out about, well, how did people get back, and and all the rest of it. It's complete mince. And honestly, in order to understand the actual story, you have to actually go to St. Valery
And learn about it.
It's actually 20 miles away from Dieppe. And I've been there in one of the missions that I'd done to Calais and Dunkirk.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful, lovely wee town and stuff like that. And
Okay.
the actual history in it itself.
Chris, I'd love to hear the rest of this story, but we've actually completely run out of time this evening. I'm sorry this item is at the end of the programme. Maybe talk about it another time.
I was just going to say, go for a weekend. You'll
Okay,
enjoy it, folks.
thank you, Chris. Anyway, that is it for this evening's show. If you want to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, you can do so by following the directions on your screen now. But that's it from Thursday's edition of Scotland at 7. I'd like to thank my guests, Dave Tucker and Chris McCusker. And I will see you again on Monday. Have a very good week, and I'll see you on Monday.